Hey guys, okay, so welcome to my manual camera little photography session. I'm just going to run through some basics. If you pop on here and you have a question, don't worry about having to watch the entire thing. Just go ahead and drop your question. I'll answer it and you can watch it in the replay. I'm going to be uploading the video to my YouTube without the questions and answers, so that's why I'm saving them for the end. Also, I want to post a couple graphs and stuff at the end. But I have been photographing with a DSLR for about 10 years, and I started kind of playing with manual focus about 6 years ago. And I haven't went to school for photography or anything like that. I'm completely self-taught, and it took a lot of years of pretty much just experimenting to figure out exactly what kind of style I like and stuff like that. So if you have been wanting to shift over to manual mode in your camera and you've been scared to, I'm here to tell you that it's really not scary at all. Once you play around with it a little bit, it gets really easy. You'll find your style and you'll know exactly where to hit it. Now there's a couple key things to think about when you're shooting in manual, and the first one is your light meter. And your light meter, if you're looking at your camera, when you look into the viewfinder, you won't be able to see it, but when you look into the viewfinder at the bottom, you're going to see something that looks like a meter of numbers. And when you turn your lens around, that affects your meter, and you'll see where the tick mark will kind of shift. And what the light meter is doing, it's just measuring the light that's coming in. So when that ticker hits the 0 mark, you'll know that your image will be perfectly exposed according to technical standards. I usually like mine to be a little bit underexposed. And the reason for that is I shoot in RAW. And basically, to explain the difference between RAW images and JPEG images, only Photoshop can open raw images, and what it does is it takes when you click the shutter, it takes like 4 images of information. So if you want to adjust the settings, it's a lot easier, and the pigments stay very true because it's taking 4 pictures of information versus the JPEG, which only has the 1 image of information, if that kind of makes sense. Hi Maki. Let's see what the next thing is. Okay, so that's the RAW and JPEG. Also, whenever I'm shooting portraits, if you shoot something and it's overexposed, meaning there is too much light in your picture, you're basically destroying some of the information. So when I shoot in RAW, and I shoot a little underexposed, because what the underexposure is going to do is keep all those shadows, it's going to keep all that detail, and it gives you a way better canvas to work with when you are doing your post-processing. You'll have more information to kind of manipulate and look at. The next thing you want to look at is aperture. Now, if the 4 things I'm talking about are just too overwhelming right now, aperture is where you'll get that professional looking, creamy background looking images, and the aperture messes with the depth of field. And I'm going to show you that stuff. But the aperture is basically the, if you look into like the olden day cameras, it's the eye of the camera. So when it opens up and it closes, that's the aperture. And it's basically letting light in and keeping light out. So the lower your aperture, I'm going to show you on the camera. Pull this up really quick. Let me light it up if you can see it. Okay, so right here, this 1.4 number, that is actually your aperture, and the lower that number is going to be the higher your depth of field. So let me just show you really quick. This is at 1.4. I'm using my son's nice little T-Rex to demonstrate. Okay. Let's just pull this up really quickly. So you can tell that the background is nice and creamy, whereas the T-Rex's face is in clear focus, and I will be uploading this stuff later with the measurements so you can kind of get a better comparison and see what you're doing. Okay, now let's say we want to bring that aperture up. So this one's at 1.4 right now, and what we are going to do, we are going to shoot that up to, let's go to 4.0. And then what that's going to do is it's going to create a smaller field for that for that depth of field focus, so you'll be able to get more things in focus instead of a small area in focus. So I'll just take a picture really quick. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so if you look here, you can see that more of the wooden background is in focus and the T-Rex is also in focus. So if you are shooting portraits and it's only one person, you might want to stick with 2.8. This is going to allow your entire face to be in focus, and it's going to make sure that like in some pictures you'll have one eye in focus and one eye not in focus. It'll make sure the entire face is in focus, especially the eyes is where you want to concentrate on. If you're shooting a group, you want to make that aperture number larger. And then if you're shooting, let's say, wedding rings, you want that aperture to be a smaller number, so it creates that like pin focus. The next thing you want to pay attention to is your shutter speed. So this number right here, the 50, is your shutter speed. The faster the shutter speed is obviously faster the shutter speed, and that is going to be used if you're taking pictures of kids at the playground, or there's movement and you need to just get it really quick. Let's see, for a smaller shutter speed, you can use that for example, the images where I'm sure all of us have seen where people are standing on the bridge over the highway, and you see the trails of lights from the cars. So what they've done is they've lowered that shutter speed so it captures that light at a longer period of time. Let me see if I can just demonstrate that really quick. So I'm gonna crank this shutter speed down so that it takes a long time for that shutter, like it's gonna open and it'll be longer before it closes up. So okay, so this is actually a perfect example. So when I took the picture, I moved the camera to kind of give you an idea of if my subject was moving. And the lower the shutter speed, that's what you're going to get. So that's definitely not something you want to use if you're capturing like your kids and stuff like that. Let's go ahead, so right now it's at 8 for that blurry picture. So let's go ahead and crank it up to about 250, and let's see what we get. And I'm gonna move the camera again as well. Yeah, I took 2 of them. And this one's darker because I did not adjust my stuff. 1 second. Okay, here we go. I got focused on the shutter speed only. Okay, so you can see at this one, you saw that I moved the camera. It's perfectly in focus because it was a very quick shutter speed. So keep that in mind. It depends on what kind of image you want to capture. And then ISO. ISO is basically your camera's sensitivity to light. Now, if you are, I have some friends who do like concert pictures and stuff like that. If you're doing concert pictures, you want a very much larger dynamic range for your ISO levels. Like if your camera only goes to 800, that's not going to work for like concert pictures in the dark. The darker your images need to be, the higher your ISO level needs to be. So if you are outside and you're just shooting pictures of your kids or something like that, a great ISO to stick with is going to be 100 to 200. And what the ISO is also going to do is predict the noise in your images. So for example, I'm going to take one at 100 really quick. Let me get all my settings right so that it's correct. Okay. Okay, so when I pull this when I pull this image up into the things that I'm going to drop down in the comments to kind of show you, I'm going to zoom it in really tight so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about, because it's hard to see on the camera. But it's going to, have you ever looked at the pictures that have like the speckles? That's called noise. And the higher your ISO level, the more noise it's going to put in that picture, because it's trying to create that detail. So let me just go ahead and bump it up so when I pull up this image you can really see what I'm talking about. And I'm actually going to bump this ISO up to 4000 just because when you see the dramatic difference, it's easier to put it together in your head. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, and so if you're shooting your kids outside, 100 to 200, and if you're shooting indoors, I would say anywhere from 800 to 1600. If you can keep it at 800, that's going to be golden, because you're not going to get those intense noise levels in there. But yeah, I explained RAW versus JPEG. The tips on exposure: keep your exposure lower. So the 4 things you want to pay attention to is your light meter, which is inside your camera. You'll see it in here and it will show you things. Your aperture, which is your depth of field, so how big that eye is going to open up in your camera. Your shutter speed, so the longer the shutter speed, the more blurry your image can become. The higher your shutter speed is great for movement and stuff like that. And ISO, which is going to be your camera's sensitivity to light. If by chance you start kind of messing around with your camera and putting these things together and it's just like not happening for you, what you can do, if you still want like the creamy pictures like I did, this is where I started, you want to go to your where is it? Okay, so see if I can get it in focus. Okay, so you can see it's on manual. There's another one that says AV, and that's basically going to give your aperture the priority. So if you want to get those really creamy pictures with a really beautiful bokeh background, but like your kid is in focus, go to your aperture priority. And typically most little like kit cameras that you purchase online come with a lens that go to 2.8. That's going to be where you want to put your settings at. So just go ahead and let me just pull this up so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Mine goes a little bit lower, but as you can see, my aperture is right here, that 2.5. And as I move that, well, when it's in a different light and everything, what it's going to do is it's going to adjust all the other settings for you. So just do your aperture, and then everything else will be kind of automatic for you. But just keep in mind, if you're in a really dark place, it might make your exposure a little long to try to compensate for that perfect light exposure for your image, and sometimes that's not what you want. So it's really just a lot of trial and error. If you have any questions after seeing this video, just go ahead and drop them below. I'll answer them for you because I don't see any right now. And I'm going to go ahead and upload those other pictures to kind of show you the settings that I used through this. And I hope that was useful to you. All right, guys. Bye.